Metaphysics by Aristotle Book Summary. Aristotle, 384–322 BCE, is one of the most important figures in Western philosophy, and his work on metaphysics is among his most notable contributions. Metaphysics is a branch of philosophy that deals with questions of existence and reality. It studies what entities exist, what their essential nature is, how they interact with each other, and what kind of categories we can use to describe and analyze them. Aristotle's metaphysics can be divided into several main areas. 1. Substance. Aristotle identifies substance as the primary category of being. For Aristotle, a substance is a separate, individual thing, like a person or a horse. Substances have properties and undergo changes but maintain a certain core of identity. 2. Essence. Aristotle claims that substances have an essence or nature, which is what it is to be that kind of thing. For example, the essence of a horse is what it is to be a horse, and this distinguishes it from other substances, like humans or rocks. 3. Potentiality and actuality. Aristotle developed the concept of potentiality, dynamis, and actuality, entelechia. For instance, an acorn has the potentiality to become an oak tree, but it's not an oak tree until that potentiality is actualized. 4. Four causes. Aristotle's doctrine of the four causes is central to his metaphysics. These are the material cause, the matter of which a thing is made, the formal cause, the form or pattern that a thing embodies, the efficient cause, the agent or force immediately responsible for bringing this thing about, and the final cause, the end or purpose for which a thing is. 5. Teleology. This refers to Aristotle's belief that everything in nature has a purpose or end goal. This includes not only human actions, but also the behaviors of animals and the growing of plants. 6. First cause or unmoved mover. Aristotle also argued for the existence of a first cause, often identified with God, that initiates all motion and change, but is itself unchanging. Remember that while these concepts are helpful for understanding Aristotle's metaphysics, they were developed within a very specific historical and philosophical context. The translation and interpretation of Aristotle's works over centuries have added layers of complexity to understanding his metaphysics. Aristotle's metaphysics is traditionally divided into 14 books, or chapters, each designated by a letter of the Greek alphabet. Here is a quick overview of them. 1. Book Alpha examines the concept of first philosophy or wisdom and the subjects that fall under this domain. 2. Book Little Alpha, often referred to as Book Alpha Mason or Little Alpha. It's generally agreed that this book was added later and is not by Aristotle. 3. Book Beta presents a series of problems and puzzles about being and substance. 4. Book Gamma establishes the study of being qua being, asserting that philosophy is the science of being insofar as it is being. 5. Book Delta provides definitions for many of Aristotle's philosophical terms. 6. Book Epsilon, short book repeating many points from the earlier books, possibly added later. 7. Book Zeta, arguably the center of the metaphysics, where Aristotle develops his theory of substance. 8. Book Eta, short book mainly concerned with unity and its relation to being. 9. Book Theta focuses on potentiality and actuality. 10. Book Iota, a relatively short book dealing with the concept of being in terms of quantity and mathematical properties. 11. Book Kappa, a summary of previous material mostly from books Gamma, Epsilon, and Iota. 12. Book Lambda contains Aristotle's arguments for a first cause, often identified as God. 13. Book Mu and Book Nu, Aristotle's examination of Plato's theory of forms in mathematics. Again, remember that metaphysics wasn't the original title of this collection of works. The title was given by later editors due to the books being placed after the physics in the traditional ordering of Aristotle's works. In Metaphysics Book Alpha, Aristotle outlines his conception of the nature and purpose of philosophy, particularly focusing on what he refers to as first philosophy or wisdom. Aristotle begins by explaining that all humans naturally desire to know, which is evident from our fascination with our senses, especially sight. He claims that our love for sensory experience is primarily driven by our love of knowledge, not merely for their practical utility. Aristotle then distinguishes between different kinds of knowledge, asserting that theoretical knowledge, especially first philosophy or wisdom, is the highest form. Theoretical knowledge for Aristotle is knowledge sought for its own sake and not for any practical end. This wisdom or first philosophy differs from other forms of knowledge in that it is concerned with first causes and principles, meaning it seeks to uncover the fundamental truths or realities that underpin everything else. It's interested in understanding the nature of being qua being, or being in its most general or fundamental sense. He also differentiates between practical sciences like ethics and politics, productive sciences like rhetoric and poetics, and theoretical sciences like physics and metaphysics, each with different methods and aims. Aristotle then discusses the four types of causes: material, formal, efficient, and final, and argues that knowledge of these causes constitutes wisdom. In particular, he suggests that the final cause or purpose of a thing is the most important. In the end, Aristotle identifies the wise man as one who knows all things, even if not in detail, about first principles and causes. He indicates that wisdom is more exact, more capable of teaching, more archaic, and more knowable in nature. Thus, the philosopher who engages in this type of inquiry has knowledge that is both highly general and highly valuable. The chapter ultimately sets the stage for the rest of the metaphysics, defining the scope of philosophy and its preeminent status among forms of knowledge. In Metaphysics Book Beta, Aristotle presents what is often called an aporia, or a list of puzzles, problems, or paradoxes that he thinks philosophy must address. This book functions as a kind of agenda for the rest of the work, sketching out the main metaphysical questions that need answering. These questions largely revolve around the nature of substance, cause, and change. He raises various important questions in this book. For instance, he asks whether there is a separate substance, in addition to sensible ones, that is immortal and unchanging. Aristotle also questions if there are universal principles, whether they can exist separately, and whether they are substances. Additionally, he is interested in the relationship between universal principles and sensible substances. Furthermore, Aristotle questions how substance is related to its attributes. He asks if substances are composed of matter or of form, or both. He wonders how change is possible if substances are defined by their essence, which presumably doesn't change. Another significant question is about the existence and nature of void or vacuum. Aristotle ponders whether it exists or not, and if it does, how it fits into our understanding of nature. Finally, Aristotle also reflects on the nature of the one and the many, as these are principles used in various forms of argument. By raising these complex questions, Aristotle in Book Beta is setting the stage for the rest of metaphysics. He doesn't provide answers to these problems in this book. Instead, he identifies the problems as central to the study of being as being, which he will develop and explore in the subsequent books. In Metaphysics Book Gamma, Aristotle lays out the project of first philosophy, the study of being qua being. This investigation involves exploring the fundamental principles and causes of reality. He asserts that philosophy is the science of being insofar as it is being. One of Aristotle's primary concerns in this book is to argue against relativism, the view that truth and falsity are a matter of individual perspective or cultural background. He believes in the principle of non-contradiction, the idea that it is not possible for something to both be and not be in the same respect at the same time. He considers this principle to be the firmest of all principles. Aristotle discusses that if there were no absolute truth, then everything would be true and false at the same time, and our knowledge would be reduced to mere opinion. He argues that the principle of non-contradiction is not just a hypothesis that underpins scientific knowledge, but is the most certain principle of all, which cannot be proved by science as it is more fundamental than science itself. In addition, Aristotle investigates being in this book. He states that being is not a genus, meaning that being is not a category or class of things. This is because different categories of things, like substance, quality, place, etc., are not just different kinds of beings, they are fundamentally different ways in which something can be. Furthermore, Aristotle also distinguishes between accidental and essential properties. An essential property makes a thing what it is, while an accidental property is one that a thing can have without it affecting the thing's essence. By the end of the book, Aristotle has established a strong foundation for the study of being and prepared for the in-depth discussion of substance that will occur in the following books. In Metaphysics Book Delta, Aristotle provides definitions and elucidates many of the key concepts and terms that are used throughout the metaphysics. This is sometimes referred to as a philosophical lexicon or glossary. One of the central themes of this book is an exploration of the many meanings of being. Aristotle presents being as a concept that is expressed in multiple ways and is not a single uniform concept. Aristotle elaborates on various categories, including substance, relation, quantity, and quality, among others. Importantly, he expands on the concept of cause, refining it from his earlier works and firmly establishing the notion of four types of causes: material, formal, efficient, and final. 1. Material cause, the matter or substance from which a thing is made. For instance, bronze can be seen as the material cause of a statue. 2. Formal cause, the form, pattern, essence, or archetype of the thing. It is the idea existing in the first place as a model in the craftsman's mind, then in the work itself. 3. Efficient cause, the source of the primary principle of change or stability. This could be a person who made an object or an event that triggered a change. 4. Final cause, the end, purpose, or goal for the sake of which a thing exists or is done, including both intrinsic ends and extrinsic ends. Furthermore, Aristotle explores notions such as nature, necessity, one and many, whole, prior and posterior, potentiality and actuality, and many more. Book Delta serves as an important reference point for understanding the specialized vocabulary of Aristotelian metaphysics. It provides the tools required to understand the detailed discussions of substance, change, and causality that are the main focus of the later books. In Metaphysics Book Epsilon, Aristotle recapitulates and refines many of the points previously addressed, while also adding important clarifications. He begins by reaffirming that wisdom, or first philosophy, is knowledge of the first causes and principles of things. He explains that these first principles are more certain than any subsequent conclusions drawn from them. Therefore, the most fundamental of all sciences must be the one concerned with these first causes. Next, Aristotle delves into the concept of substance again, recognizing that substance can be perceived in various ways. He argues that the essence of a substance does not lie in merely being a this, but in being separable and being a this. He restates that categories other than substance, such as quality, quantity, and relation, cannot exist separately from substances. They exist only within substances, underpinning his argument that substance is primary in the hierarchy of being. Aristotle also touches on the principles of definition, elaborating on how we define things. He states that a definition that indicates the essential nature of a thing must not include a reference to the matter of which it is composed. Rather, it should focus on the form of the thing, its essential properties. In conclusion, Book Epsilon serves as a transition from the preliminary discussions in the first 4 books to the more detailed explorations in the later books. It reiterates key themes and introduces significant ideas that lay the groundwork for Aristotle's extensive inquiry into the nature of substance in the subsequent books. In Metaphysics Book Zeta, Aristotle embarks on one of the most profound inquiries in his entire body of work, the investigation into the nature of substance. His aim is to understand the fundamental nature of reality, and he believes that this is tied to the concept of substance. Aristotle begins by enumerating the different senses in which we use the term substance. He identifies 3 main senses: the essence, or what it was to be a thing, the universal, or the general category to which a thing belongs, and the substratum, or the underlying matter or material that a thing is made of. In this book, Aristotle focuses on the essence. He posits that the essence of a thing is what it is said to be in its own right, and not in relation to anything else. For instance, the essence of a triangle is to have 3 sides. Aristotle makes a clear distinction between actuality and potentiality in this discussion. A substance's potentiality is its ability to change, while its actuality is its fulfillment of that potential. For example, a block of marble, in its potentiality, can be sculpted into a statue, its actuality. He also argues that substance is the subject of predicates, but is not itself predicated of anything else, and substance is what things are primarily said to be. In other words, everything else, like qualities, quantities, etc., exists in and is predicated of substances. Throughout Book Zeta, Aristotle continues to wrestle with the complex concept of substance. While he does not come to a definitive conclusion, the book marks a significant step in his metaphysical inquiry, setting up further discussions in the following books. In Metaphysics, Book Eta Aristotle continues his exploration of substance that he began in the previous book. However, this book is considered by many scholars to be somewhat tangential or supplementary to the core argument. Aristotle discusses the issue of actuality and potentiality, which are central to his conception of being and change. He addresses these concepts in the context of substances, reiterating the idea that substances can be understood as composites of matter, potentiality, and form, actuality. The philosopher further explores the relationship between form and matter. He suggests that a complete substance, a hylomorphic compound, is not just its form or just its matter, but rather it's a composite of both. Moreover, Aristotle discusses the idea of the privation of form, which is another type of potentiality. Privation refers to the absence or lack of form. He uses examples such as blindness, which is the lack of sight, and emptiness, which is the lack of fullness. Finally, Aristotle also returns to the discussion of universal substances and particular substances, a topic he explored in the previous book. He asserts that only particular substances, such as this dog or that tree, truly exist, while universal substances, like dogness or treeness, are only concepts in the mind. In Book Eta, Aristotle provides further depth to his investigation of substance, focusing on its actuality and potentiality, form and matter, and the relationship between the universal and the particular. This aids in the understanding of Aristotle's subsequent discussions of substance and its changes. In Metaphysics, Book Theta, Aristotle continues his investigation into the nature of substance, this time focusing more specifically on the concepts of potentiality and actuality, which are fundamental to his understanding of change and movement. At the beginning of the book, Aristotle reiterates the distinction between potentiality and actuality. Potentiality refers to the capacity or ability to change, while actuality is the realization or fulfillment of that capacity. For example, an acorn has the potentiality to become an oak tree, and it realizes its actuality when it grows and matures into one. He then delves into a detailed analysis of these two concepts. Aristotle discusses different types of potentialities, distinguishing between those that always produce a positive result and those that can produce either a positive or a negative result. He uses the example of health and disease, where health always brings a positive state, being healthy, but the potentiality for disease does not always result in illness. It could also result in continued health. Aristotle also explores the idea of kinetic potentiality, which refers to the process of moving from potentiality to actuality. He argues that this process itself involves change and therefore also requires an actuality. In Metaphysics, Book Mu and Book Nu, Aristotle further explores some of the central concepts of his metaphysics, including substance, essence, and the principles of being. Although these books are often thought to be earlier and less mature drafts of the arguments found in the central books, Zeta, Eta, Theta, and Iota. Book Mu focuses on potentiality and actuality, two critical concepts in Aristotle's metaphysics. It delves into the nuances of these ideas, such as how things can transition from potentiality to actuality. Aristotle uses a variety of examples, like the transformation of an acorn into an oak tree, to illustrate these points. Book Nu revisits the idea of substance, a topic Aristotle first introduced in the earlier books. Here, he reconsiders the definition of substance and explores its various aspects, including matter, form, and the composite of matter and form. The concept of substance is vital for Aristotle, as he sees it as the primary category of being. In both of these books, Aristotle's approach is more exploratory and less refined than in the central books of the metaphysics. This suggests that these books could have been earlier drafts of his thoughts on these topics, offering insights into his philosophical process. As with other parts of the metaphysics, the interpretation and understanding of these books often depend on the reader's perspective and the specific edition of the text used. Conclusion. In metaphysics, Aristotle investigates the fundamental nature of reality, focusing on the concepts of being, substance, potentiality, actuality, form, matter, and causality. This seminal work provides the foundation for the philosophical field of metaphysics. Aristotle's exploration of being leads him to distinguish between accidental and essential properties. Essential properties constitute a thing's essence, what it is by its very nature, independent of how it may change or appear. This notion plays into his definition of substance, the primary category of being, which Aristotle perceives as a composite of matter, the material stuff of which things are made, and form, the arrangement or structure of that matter. The notions of potentiality, the capacity for change, and actuality, the realization of that capacity, are key to understanding change in Aristotle's metaphysics. For example, an acorn, in its potentiality, becomes an oak tree, its actuality, through growth and development. Aristotle concludes with his argument for a prime mover or unmoved mover, an entity that instigates motion and change, but is itself unmoved. It is perfect, eternal, and engages in pure thought, contemplating itself. Overall, metaphysics presents a comprehensive, though complex, system that seeks to explain the nature of reality, grounding its analysis in observable phenomena while extending its reach to the most abstract and universal aspects of existence.